Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
If you stay, you won't live to see the morning, the nurse said, pulling the millionaire out of the hospital room. A month later, he wanted to buy her an apartment, but froze when he found out who her father really was. Before we continue the story, write your name and city in the comments. She yanked him by the arm so forcefully that he almost lost his balance. For a second, it seemed that just a little more, and he would fall onto the cold tiled floor, hitting his head on the metal corner of the bed. Adrenaline surged into his temples, and his heart started pounding so fast it felt like he was back in the ring of his youth. Though in reality, he had never been a professional athlete. Still, life had thrown so many challenges at him that these sudden rushes of adrenaline had long become familiar. "What are you doing?" he croaked as the nurse, a slim young woman in a white uniform cinched at the waist, practically dragged him down the hallway. Her eyes were filled with worry and a strange fear that he couldn't help but sense himself. "If you stay here, you won't live to see the morning," she repeated, her voice steady but tense. "I'm saving your life." His name was Rodrigo Vasquez. He was 45 years old and had long since stopped trusting anyone or anything except vetted business partners and notarized documents. That was the life he had chosen, or rather, the life that had chosen him. Deception, intrigue, and the need to be constantly on guard had surrounded him ever since he had made his first fortune. He once believed that fate had no surprises left for him, but at 45, he was about to experience a real shock. Not only from the attempt on his life, but also from discovering who the girl saving him truly was. She was a nurse's aide in the closed ward of a private clinic, where Rodrigo had been taken after a sudden heart attack. Vasquez had always thought himself healthy enough not to be taken down by mere chest pain, and yet it had happened. A sharp pain struck him right in his office while he was signing another contract. Collapse. Ambulance. ICU. He woke up in a comfortable room with a private bathroom and a view of a well-kept garden. He had enough money to afford the best medical care. But now, it was clear that no amount of money would save him if the enemy was already close. "Listen," he hissed when the girl pushed him around a corner and pressed him against the wall. "I don't even understand. Who wants me dead?" The nurse glanced around like a spy from an old movie, then whispered, "I overheard them by accident. They plan to inject you with the wrong medication. By morning, your heart will stop. Officially, it'll be recorded as a complication after the heart attack. And they'll get what they want." "Who are they?" Rodrigo tensed, steadying her face. It seemed vaguely familiar, but he chalked it up to weakness after his illness and general stress. "I don't know their exact names, but one thing's clear, it's someone from your competitors. I overheard a phone call. Make sure he doesn't last till morning. We'll pay well. Make it look natural." She spoke with such horror and pain in her voice that Rodrigo felt a lump rise in his throat. "I couldn't just stand by," she added. "You have to get out of here." "Get out? Where to?" "I have a friend, a nurse. She can help get you out through the back exit." Rodrigo took a step back. He had no idea who this girl really was, why she was risking herself, or whether he could trust her. But deep inside, something told him she was telling the truth. Her eyes were too sincere, and the tremor in her voice was too real to be faked. "First, tell me who you are," he said, gripping her hand, trying to stay calm. "I'm just a nurse's aide," she replied, flustered. "My name is Isabel. That's all you need to know for now." "All right, Isabel," he exhaled heavily, feeling a cramp in his chest, "but I can't just run out of here without some kind of plan. I have security, somewhere in the hallway." "There's no security," she almost shouted when she saw him about to call for his bodyguards. "I saw one of them leave with the head doctor, and the other one, well, I don't know, maybe he was bribed or distracted, but right now, you're on your own." It took all his willpower not to call for help immediately. But Isabel looked at him in a way that made him realize she was the only one truly helping him right now. "All right," he agreed, his mouth dry. "Show me where to go." They moved quickly down an empty corridor toward a service exit, where a young nurse was waiting with a key to the staff elevator. When he stepped outside through the back wing of the building, the wind hit his neck with an icy chill, sweeping away all traces of the hospital's stuffy heat and antiseptic smell. Everything happened so fast that Vasquez didn't have time to process it. Only when they pushed him into the back seat of an ambulance parked under the side porch did he realize he had actually escaped the clinic where death had been waiting for him. "There's a driver, a friend of mine," Isabel said, closing the ambulance door. "He'll take you somewhere safe." "And you?" "I'm coming with you, otherwise you might end up right back where you started." "That wasn't part of my plan," Rodrigo muttered, but he didn't argue. He was too exhausted, and deep down, he was grateful that someone had risked everything to save him. Even if that someone was just a nurse's aide, she clearly wasn't as simple as she seemed. Thus began this strange story, full of surprises and secrets, a story in which Rodrigo would discover the whole truth, who Isabel really was, who had ordered his murder, and most importantly, something about himself that would change his life forever. The road felt endless. The vehicle quickly sped onto the highway, carrying them far away from the clinic's walls. Outside the window, streetlights, roadside diners, and road signs blurred into the night. The driver, a sturdy man in his 30s, sat silently behind the wheel, seemingly used to such covert operations. Isabel kept glancing back at Rodrigo to check on him. "Are you all right? You look pale." He gave a wry smile. "Pale isn't quite the word. I nearly lost my life. How do you think I should feel?" She lowered her eyes, realizing how harsh that sounded. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know this must be a shock for you." "Shock is an understatement. Tell me honestly, what are you expecting from me as a reward?" Isabel bit her lip. She clearly sensed the implication that Rodrigo suspected her of wanting money or some other payoff. "I'm not expecting anything," she answered honestly. "I just couldn't stand by and do nothing." She spoke so softly that her voice was almost lost in the hum of the engine. "All right, I'll believe you," Rodrigo said, turning to the window. He still couldn't quite accept the fact that someone had seriously tried to have him killed. His heart ached, not badly, more like a discomfort and a gnawing anxiety. The physical pain from the heart attack had mostly passed, but the psychological strain was hitting him harder than anything. After half an hour, the vehicle turned off the main road and stopped in front of a small private house behind a tall fence. "This is my uncle's house," Isabel explained. "He's away on a business trip, so we can stay here for a few days until I help you figure out how to get out of this situation." Vasquez raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You're planning to help me? Wouldn't it be easier just to leave me here and go on with your life?" She suddenly blushed, offended. "If I wanted to leave you, I wouldn't have dragged you out of the hospital. I understand you don't trust anyone," her voice faltered, "but you don't have a choice." He sighed heavily, running a tired hand through his hair. "Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm really in shock and don't know who I can trust anymore." Isabel didn't answer, she just nodded and stepped out of the vehicle. The driver opened the door and helped Rodrigo out, steadying him by the elbow because he still felt weak after the hospital stay. The house they entered was modest, with simple furniture and clean windows where the wind tapped softly. "Where should I go?" Rodrigo asked, trying to look around. "Here," Isabel pointed to one of the rooms. "You can rest there." He entered and saw a bed with clean linens. Everything was simple, but cozy. He realized it had been a long time since he slept in such an ordinary bed, no leather headboard, no expensive mattress. How long had it been since he allowed himself to relax? "Thank you," he whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "And you?" "I'll stay in the next room." "Don't worry, no one will bother you." She started to close the door, but he stopped her. "Wait." She turned back, and Rodrigo suddenly felt a pang in his chest. In her eyes, he saw a kind of warmth and care that felt familiar, he just didn't know what to say. "Thank you again." She smiled, and the door closed. Several days passed like that. Rodrigo rested and recovered. Isabel went out to buy groceries and, sometimes, to find out what was happening in the city and whether anyone was looking for him. The nurse's driver, the young man, had disappeared by morning, slipping away without saying goodbye, but they were sure he was trustworthy. During those days, a sort of temporary trust formed between Rodrigo and Isabel. He realized she truly wasn't asking for money. She was simply living in fear that someone would find him and kill him right in front of her. Rodrigo tried to talk to her. "You don't seem like a regular nurse's aide," he said one evening as they sat in the kitchen, drinking tea from simple ceramic mugs. "I saw how quickly you scanned through the documents when I was reading my medical records. Do you have a medical background?" She lowered her eyes. "I'm studying to be a doctor. I work as a nurse's aide to pay for my education. I live alone. My mother passed away." "I see. And your father?" he asked suddenly. "Doesn't he help you?" Isabel pretended not to hear. Her face darkened sharply, and she quickly sipped her tea as if she had burned herself. "Sorry," Rodrigo muttered awkwardly. "I didn't mean to pry." She remained silent, and he decided it must be too painful for her to talk about. But something inside him stirred. He caught a strange feeling. Sometimes she looked at him as if she had known him before. And he, too, felt a vague sense of déjà vu when he looked into her eyes. Still, he blamed it on stress. Maybe they had crossed paths somewhere in the city before and just didn't remember. At night, Rodrigo often woke up drenched in sweat from nightmares, hands of assassins choking him, or 4 drips turning into poison. He would wake up gasping, heart pounding. Isabel, hearing the noise, would get up, bring him water, and try to calm him. "You're safe," she would whisper. "It's okay. You're safe." Sometimes she didn't leave, sitting quietly on a chair until he fell asleep again. And in those moments, Rodrigo realized he had grown attached to her. She reminded him of a caring sister or a kind friend, the kind of person he had never had the chance to confide in. He had no real family. His mother had died long ago. His father drank and died in a way Rodrigo preferred not to remember. He had no brothers or sisters. His wives, only fortune hunters looking for rich husbands, had left him disillusioned with women. About a week passed. He knew they couldn't stay in the house forever. Eventually, someone would find him. He needed to do something. But one evening, Isabel returned, looking pale, and said, "I need to show you something important." "What is it?" Rodrigo asked, alarmed. "I went back to the clinic and disguised so no one would recognize me," Isabel said. "I heard that your medical file has gone missing. And your competitor's security team, it seems they were spotted nearby. So, they're looking for me?" "Yes. And it looks like they have people inside the clinic. But that's not all. I overheard a conversation in the corridor. They were saying your heart attack wasn't an accident. Someone had been tampering with your medication to induce heart failure, to make sure you'd end up in the hospital where the doctors could finish the job." Rodrigo's eyes widened. He hadn't expected things to have gone this far. "Damn it," he burst out. "And who could have done this?" "I don't know, but I heard them mention Innovatech." Innovatech. The name belonged to one of the largest companies with which Vasquez had had a long-standing conflict. Its CEO, Diego Ramirez, had been trying for years to take over part of Vasquez's assets, but Rodrigo had refused to give in. Threats and blackmail had been used, but until now it had all remained within the limits of business rivalry. However, it now seemed that the competition had crossed the line into something far more dangerous. "I have to do something," Rodrigo said quietly. "I can't just sit here waiting for them to find and kill me." "Yes," Isabel nodded. "I have some connections through the university. One of the professors, a well-known doctor, someone trustworthy. I want to ask him to run tests on your samples and your medical records to find out exactly what was being administered to you. Then we could go to the police with solid evidence." Rodrigo gave a bitter smile. "I have a lot of resources. I could hire top lawyers, but the truth is, I don't know who to trust anymore. What if they've bribed my lawyers too?" "Then let's find someone you trust 100%, she suggested. "Maybe you have a friend?" I don't have friends, he replied curtly. In my world, friendships are replaced by contracts and obligations. She lowered her eyes, as if absorbing the depth of his loneliness. Then trust me, she said so softly it was barely audible. I'll do everything I can for you to survive and for the truth to come out. Rodrigo felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. He studied her face, trying to understand what truly motivated her. She seemed completely sincere. Isabel, he whispered, you have no idea how unusual it is for me to trust someone like this. Maybe we're not such strangers after all, she said suddenly, with a slight smile. It sounded mysterious, and something inside him tightened. What do you mean? Nothing, Isabel quickly corrected herself. I just meant we've been living together for a week now. Anyway, let me tell you what we should do next. She sat down across from him and started outlining the plan, how to contact her professor, how to discreetly pass along the test samples and medical records, how to properly document the evidence of tampered medication. Rodrigo listened carefully, asking questions from time to time. He was beginning to realize that this girl was far more intelligent and resourceful than her nurse's aide title suggested. The next day, they went to the university. Isabel wore a mask and a cap to avoid attracting attention, and she advised Rodrigo to dress simply and wear glasses to make him less recognizable. They entered the laboratory building, where a slender man with a graying beard received them in his office. I won't ask unnecessary questions, he said after glancing through the papers. You want me to confirm that the patient was given substances that induce heart failure? Yes, Rodrigo replied, deciding it was best to keep it brief and to the point. The professor looked at him carefully over his glasses. Very well. I'll run the tests, but it will take some time. I can only deliver the results to you personally. Of course, Vasquez agreed. While the tests were underway, they waited for a few hours in a small office. Isabel pretended to read something on her phone, but she was clearly nervous. Rodrigo paced the room, listening for every sound, half expecting a squad of armed men to burst in and drag him away in handcuffs. When the professor finally returned, holding a stack of papers, his face was grave. It's confirmed, he said in a low voice. According to the tests, there are traces of substances in the patient's blood that are used to simulate heart failure. With excessive use, the risk of cardiac arrest is extremely high. So someone was trying to kill me? Rodrigo asked. A chill ran down his spine. The professor nodded. If you had stayed in the hospital, one more dose would have been enough. Rodrigo closed his eyes. Isabel squeezed his hand. We can use these results as evidence, she said resolutely. The professor sighed heavily. I'll give you a report. But please understand, by doing this, I'm taking a risk. I respect your father. He suddenly cut himself off, glancing at Isabel. Let's just say I want the truth to come out. You know her father? Rodrigo couldn't help but ask. The professor raised his eyebrows in surprise. Yours? No, of course not. I just meant I respect people who, he clearly realized he had made a slip. In any case, be careful. Rodrigo exchanged a glance with Isabel but decided not to press the issue. At that moment, she tugged on his sleeve, signaling that it was time to leave. As they exited the university, Rodrigo asked, Did you notice how he slipped up? He said, I respect your father, and looked at you. Isabel turned pale. He probably just mixed up his words. But he said your father, looking at you. She stayed silent, and Rodrigo once again felt that she was hiding something. But now wasn't the time to press her. They had evidence of a criminal conspiracy in their hands, and they had to act quickly. They returned to the house and continued discussing their next steps. Rodrigo insisted they contact an old acquaintance, a former high-ranking police officer who had once helped him with security issues. He called and arranged a meeting on neutral ground. They were supposed to meet in the evening, but the plan changed abruptly. A black car pulled up in front of the house, and two men in black suits approached the gate. Isabel peeked out the window and went pale. Who are they? Rodrigo whispered, coming up beside her. I have no idea, but it looks like they're looking for someone. Maybe just passers-by? They both understood how unlikely that was. The men were knocking on the gate, peering into the yard, clearly searching for signs of life inside. Rodrigo tensed. We need to leave, he whispered. Isabel agreed. They quickly packed their things, hid the evidence and documents, took the professor's report, slipped out through the back door, climbed over a low fence into a neighboring yard, and ran down a narrow alley. There, a car was waiting, one Isabel had arranged to borrow from a friend. Faster, she urged as she got behind the wheel, before they realize we're gone. Rodrigo jumped in beside her and buckled his seatbelt. His hands were trembling with anxiety, but he forced himself to stay composed. The car sped away and soon merged into the city traffic. I hope they don't have a trace on the license plate, Isabel muttered, glancing in the rearview mirror. Where are we going now? Rodrigo asked. To your police contact. Can we call him on the way and move the meeting to today? All right, he agreed, reaching for his phone. But before he could dial, the phone rang, an unknown number. Rodrigo hesitated, uncertain whether to answer, but finally pressed the button. A rough male voice came through. Vasquez, we know you're alive. It's a shame our plans had to change. But know this, we won't back down. If you don't cooperate over Innovatech, you're finished. Who is this? Rodrigo hissed. You know damn well. And your little girlfriend will suffer too if you keep being stubborn. The line went dead. Rodrigo clenched his jaw, rage and fear mixing in his gut. Ramirez, that bastard. He muttered. Isabel, having caught a few words, turned pale. They know about me. Don't be afraid, he squeezed her hand, though he knew how unconvincing that sounded. We'll do everything to keep you safe. They sped forward, Rodrigo's heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Never before had he been in such a terrible situation, not just a threat to his business but a real threat to his life. They arrived at the meeting place, a small bar, where Rafael Mendoza, a retired police colonel, was waiting for them. Rafael had chosen the location for its safety. Rodrigo, Mendoza greeted him, giving him a manly hug and eyeing Isabel with curiosity. Who's this with you? My. Rodrigo hesitated. My savior. Meet Isabel. Isabel, Mendoza nodded and invited them to sit. Tell me what's going on. Rodrigo explained everything, the murder attempt, the evidence, the blackmail from his rivals. Look, Mendoza said, I can pass your material to people I trust, but I can't give you a 100% guarantee. Corruption is everywhere. He sighed. But if we play it smart, we have a chance. That's all I can hope for, Rodrigo replied wearily. But you know, Rafael continued, this won't come cheap. You'll need to pay lawyers, investigators, the ones who can still be trusted. Your competitors won't spare any expense to shut this down. Money's not the issue, Rodrigo grimaced. The issue is proving it all. At that moment, Isabel interjected. It's also important to keep us safe. They might try again. I see the girl's sharp, Mendoza smiled. All right, I'll assign you protection from trusted guys until we sort this out. But, he added, looking closely at Isabel, you'll have to give a statement too. You were a witness at the clinic. Isabel paled but nodded. All right, Rodrigo agreed. We're in. They finalized the plan, handed over copies of the clinic documents and the professor's report, and scheduled a time for the security team to arrive. The next day, Isabel and Rodrigo stayed on edge, constantly checking the doors and peeking out windows. They had moved into a rented apartment, arranged by one of Rafael's men. It was plain but safe, and that was all that mattered. You'll have to get used to it, the man reassured them. It's only temporary. Isabel sighed heavily but admitted it was better than living in constant fear. Time passed, and the investigators began verifying the information. Rodrigo had to reach out to his partners, informing them he was continuing his treatment outside the city. Only his closest and most trusted associates knew where he really was. But something was troubling Rodrigo more and more, his strange feelings toward Isabel. He noticed how she sometimes looked at him as if she knew something about him he didn't. And her words, "Maybe we're not such strangers after all," kept replaying in his mind. He tried to talk to her about it, but she always dodged or changed the subject. Then one evening, as they sat in the kitchen of the rental, Isabel suddenly broke down in tears. I can't take it anymore," she sobbed, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "It's so hard watching you live like this, knowing that I—" "Knowing what?" he asked, surprised, taking her hands. "Calm down, everything is moving in the right direction. We'll solve this soon." She looked at him, her eyes full of not just tears but deep pain. "I need to confess something." "Confess what?" His heart skipped a beat. She fell silent, staring into his face. "Do you remember having a relationship about 20 years ago?" she asked suddenly. Rodrigo blinked. "A relationship?" I had a few." "Why do you ask?" Isabel looked away. "My mother's name was Carmen. Carmen Lopez." Rodrigo frowned, trying to remember. The name stirred something in the depths of his memory, a distant recollection. Carmen. Yes, there was a girl I dated for about a year when I was in college. But we broke up. Tears welled up again in Isabel's eyes. "She died when I was 10 years old." "I'm sorry," he murmured. "But she told me my father's name before she died," Isabel said softly. "She said he didn't even know about my birth because she found out she was pregnant after you had already separated, and she couldn't reach you." Rodrigo's heart tightened. He looked at Isabel, trying to understand where she was going with this, but he was already beginning to suspect. "You mean to say that?" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," she whispered. "My father is you, Rodrigo." He felt the world around him shatter into pieces. A ringing filled his ears, and reality seemed to slip away. That's impossible," he gasped, pulling back. "I would never have. Your mother should have told me." "She tried," Isabel said, "but you had already moved to another city, and all contact was lost. Then she got sick and life became difficult. She thought you had surely forgotten her and wouldn't welcome such news." Rodrigo couldn't find the words, a storm of shock, disbelief, and bitterness warring within him. "Are you sure?" Isabel nodded silently and pointed to the locket around her neck. "It was a gift from her. Inside is your photograph. It's old, but the face is clearly visible." She opened the locket and pulled out a faded photograph of a young man embracing a young woman. On the back, it was signed, Carmen and Rodrigo. May 20th. A lump rose in Rodrigo's throat. Yes, it was his old flame. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he whispered, his hands trembling. "I was afraid. And besides, how could I bring this up when we were only connected by the past, and now there are all these threats?" He sighed, unsure whether to embrace her or step away. His mind was a chaotic mess. "Why are you telling me now?" She sniffled. "Because I can't lie anymore. And because I felt you had the right to know." All those moments when he'd looked into her eyes and felt a strange, inexplicable connection, now everything fell into place. "My daughter." He murmured in disbelief. "You're 19 now?" "Almost 20, she nodded. "How much pain you must have gone through without a father, with a mother who passed away." He ran a hand over his face, wiping away the moisture in his eyes. "Forgive me." No, it's not your fault," she pleaded. "You didn't know." He lowered his head, feeling a flood of emotions, joy that he had a daughter, pain that he hadn't been part of her life, anger at himself for never trying to reconnect with Carmen after their breakup. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Rodrigo flinched and looked at the screen. It was Colonel Mendoza. "Yes, Rafael," he answered, trying to steady his voice. "Urgent," Mendoza's voice came through. "We found evidence that Ramirez ordered the hit, but he's realized you're close to uncovering the truth. They might attempt another attack soon." Vasquez, hide. "I understand," Rodrigo exhaled. "Thanks for the warning." He ended the call and looked at Isabel, exhausted. "Our reality has changed," he said, trying to remain calm. "My daughter, we have to leave far away until this settles. But we have the evidence. We can." Rafael said they're desperate. They could bribe everyone they need. "Then I'm going with you," Isabel said firmly. He looked at her as if he was about to argue but realized she wouldn't back down. "All right," he agreed. "Now that we know the truth, we won't separate until this madness ends." They contacted Rafael and agreed to leave under the protection of his men to another city, where they would lay low under false names. Meanwhile, Rodrigo intended to activate his personal network, those in the business world not bought by Ramirez. Father and daughter, Rodrigo overheard one of the guards whisper. It sounded strange but warmed his heart. They spent the night on the road, crossing the provincial border. Isabel sat quietly, leaning her head on Rodrigo's shoulder, and he held her gently, afraid to scare her. He stared out the window, watching the streetlights stretch into long, glowing streaks. "I'd like to know more about you," he said when they stopped at a gas station. "About how you grew up." "My mother was a nurse," Isabel began, avoiding his eyes. "She was sick for a long time but kept working to support me. I studied as hard as I could, started working at 16, then got into medical university on family savings and grants, but money was tight, so I took a job as a nurse's aide. That's how I live." Rodrigo listened, realizing he had never been part of any of it. "Do you live alone?" he asked. She nodded. "My mother died when I was 10. I never knew my father." She looked at him. "I thought you were probably married by then or had another life." He sighed heavily. "I was married twice. Neither marriage worked out. I never had children, or so I thought." Isabel gave a nervous smile. "When I saw you at the clinic, I recognized you immediately from the photo. But I didn't dare approach, not until I overheard that phone conversation about killing you." "So that's how it is," he murmured, feeling even greater respect for her bravery. "You risked yourself to save me. How could I do otherwise if you were my father?" A lump formed in his throat every time he heard that word, father. He wasn't used to the idea of having an adult daughter, but inside he felt a strange mixture of joy and pain. "Thank you," he whispered, barely holding back his emotions. The rest of the journey was tough. They switched cars, spent the night at a cheap roadside motel, wary of drawing attention. By morning, they arrived at a small town where Mendoza's people had prepared safe housing for them, an old building on a closed-off property, well guarded from the inside. They spent several days there. Rodrigo carefully discussed with Rafael and his trusted men a strategy to bring Ramirez down, how to organize a press conference, invite major journalists, present the facts and evidence in the presence of law enforcement. At the same time, they planned to use contacts at the Ministry of Health to expose the corrupt doctors involved in the crime. "We have every chance to cause a major scandal," Rafael said. "Ramirez won't be able to sweep it under the rug." "And what if he tries to get to me first?" Rodrigo asked doubtfully. "We'll ensure your protection," the colonel assured him. Throughout those days, Isabel stayed close to him, and her care helped Rodrigo endure. Sometimes he had chest pains, the aftermath of the stress and drugs, and she would check his blood pressure, give him medication, and make him feel safe under her watchful care. It was strange, having his own daughter nearby, caring for him with genuine daughterly affection. For the first time, Rodrigo truly understood what real family support felt like. "When all this is over," he told her one day, "I want us to have the chance to really get to know each other. I want to support you in everything, your studies, your career, your life." "I didn't come here for that," Isabel said, lowering her eyes. He took her hand gently. "I know. That's exactly why I want to do it. I have a lot of money, daughter, but I've never spent it with as much joy as I would spending it on you. His words didn't sound like a transaction, but like the sincere wish of a father who had just found his daughter and wanted to make up for all the lost years. Isabel froze for a moment, then suddenly threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly, letting herself cry for the first time, not as a stranger, but as family. But on the day the press conference was to be held, what they feared happened. Early that morning, Rafael warned them that Ramirez's men were on the move and seemed to be preparing for an attack. "Maybe we should postpone?" Rodrigo asked, nervous. "We can't," the colonel argued. "It could drag on indefinitely. We're vulnerable as long as we remain silent. Once everything is made public, they'll have to retreat." They headed to the city center, where journalists were already waiting. Rodrigo and Isabel's car was part of a convoy, accompanied by 2 security vehicles. At one traffic light, a black SUV came speeding from a side street, crashing hard into one of their escort cars. "Get down," shouted one of the guards as they were boxed in. Chaos erupted, armed men jumped out, and gunfire cracked the air, shattering windows. Isabel ducked under the seat, and Rodrigo shielded her with his body, trying to protect her. Luckily, a SWAT team, tipped off by Mendoza, intervened quickly. After a short but fierce firefight, the attackers were neutralized. Rodrigo and Isabel were pulled from the car and checked for injuries. Isabel was in shock but miraculously unharmed. "Bastards," Rodrigo hissed, glaring at the detained men. Among them, he recognized a familiar face, a former bodyguard of his, now evidently bribed by Ramirez. "This is the end for them," the colonel said grimly as he approached. "Now we've got them on attempted murder charges as well." An hour later, Rodrigo and Isabel stood before the press. They detailed the corruption, the assassination attempts, and presented the documents. Law enforcement officials were present and received the evidence on the spot. The scandal erupted immediately. Innovatech was forced to issue statements. Ramirez publicly denied any involvement, but there was too much proof pointing straight at him. For Rodrigo, the press conference wasn't just a way to save his life, it was a public confession. He openly stated that the young woman beside him was his daughter, whom he had only recently found, and vowed to protect his family at any cost. The words "my daughter" sounded unfamiliar, but powerful and proud. Isabel stood next to him, her eyes brimming with tears of joy and support. She knew their relationship was just beginning, but it was real, no lies, no secrets. A few days later, Ramirez was arrested and charged with organizing the assassination attempt and corruption. This led to a high-profile trial that lasted several months. Rodrigo testified as a victim, and Isabel as a witness. The doctors involved in the scheme were also arrested and confessed under oath, confirming they had been bribed to ensure Vasquez's death. Naturally, much happened during those months. There were attempts to delay the trial, disputes over company assets, but Rodrigo wasn't about to back down. He deployed all his resources because he understood Ramirez had gone too far, and letting him get away with it would mean living under constant threat. Throughout the investigation, Rodrigo stayed close to Isabel, doing everything to protect her. He set her up in a secure location, under the guard of Rafael's most trusted men. Isabel resisted at first, feeling awkward, but Rodrigo insisted. "I can't risk losing you," he said firmly. She understood it wasn't just about protecting a witness, it was a father protecting his newly found daughter. Almost a month passed after the nightmare began. One morning, Rodrigo picked up Isabel to take her to a notary. They needed to sign some documents related to her medical testimony and protective measures. On the way, he said suddenly, "You know, I want to buy you an apartment." Isabel, staring out the window, flinched in surprise. "Why?" "I already have, well, a rented room. I'm used to living that way." "You don't understand," he said calmly but firmly. "I want you to have a place of your own. No matter what happens, you should have a safe home." "But it's too much," she started to protest but stopped when she saw the warmth in his eyes. "I know you might think I'm trying to buy your affection or reward you for saving me, but it's not that. You're my daughter. I want to take care of you." Isabel couldn't help but smile, though tears glistened in her eyes. Thank you. I'm just not used to gifts like that. I've never had my own apartment. That's going to change now, he smiled back. You saved my life. And besides, I'm your father. It's my duty. They turned onto a quiet street where the real estate agency was located. Rodrigo had already selected several options, cozy apartments in a good area near her university. At the agency, they were shown several places. Isabel felt shy and overwhelmed. It was hard to believe her father was ready to buy her a bright, comfortable apartment in a new building, with a secure entrance and a view of the park. Are you sure? She asked as they signed the preliminary agreement. You're really sure? More than ever, he smiled, and in his eyes, she saw not a hard businessman but a loving father. They agreed that all paperwork would be finalized in the coming days. Stepping out of the agency, Rodrigo breathed a sigh of relief, feeling like he had finally done something meaningful for his daughter. But that same evening, back at their rental apartment, a call came in on Rodrigo's other phone, the one he used for business matters. The news was alarming. Ramirez had been released under house arrest due to some procedural errors. Damn it! Rodrigo cursed, throwing the phone onto the table. That means he could start plotting again. But we're still taking this to court, right? Isabel asked. Of course. But now we have to be even more careful. He called Rafael to confirm the situation. Rafael assured him. Yes, Ramirez is home, but under surveillance. He won't be able to act openly. Still, Rodrigo's nerves were on edge. He couldn't forget the threats Ramirez had made or how close he had come to succeeding. People with such resources could continue weaving intrigues even from behind the walls of their mansions. A few more days passed. Isabel was happily looking forward to the upcoming move. Rodrigo was slowly regaining his health and preparing for the final court hearings. Then another call came, this time from the notary handling the apartment purchase. Mr. Vasquez, the voice sounded anxious. I need to meet you urgently. We've encountered some problems with the documents for the apartment you're buying for your daughter. Rodrigo frowned. What kind of problems? Please come in person. It's better to explain everything here. Rodrigo sensed something was wrong but decided to go. Isabel offered to accompany him, but he preferred to leave her at home under guard, fearing it could be a trap. When he arrived at the notary's office, another man was present, a representative from the bank handling the transaction. They explained that the apartment had a lien due to old debts of the developer and additional issues with the previous owner's paperwork. We can't finalize the deal until all encumbrances are lifted, the notary concluded. Rodrigo pressed his lips tightly. It took him a few minutes to realize this was either someone's mistake or a deliberate sabotage. Why are you discovering this only now? He asked. Honestly, it's unclear. Initially, the documents were clean, but suddenly claims surfaced from a company called Logistica Integral. Hearing that name, Rodrigo barely held back a curse. Logistica Integral had indirect ties to Ramirez. This could very well be his move. Damn Ramirez, he muttered. Fine. I'll take care of it. He stormed out of the notary's office, furious, realizing he would have to either find another apartment for Isabel or resolve these issues through his people. But most importantly, he realized Ramirez wasn't giving up, even under house arrest. When Rodrigo returned to Isabel, he chose not to worry her, only mentioning that the paperwork would take a few more days. She noticed he was tense and asked if everything was all right. Everything's under control, he said curtly, though she could see his headache starting again. Sit down, take something to relax, she said softly. Let me check your blood pressure. He smirked. I can't believe I used to live without this. Without regular checkups? Without a daughter. She smiled, and he looked at her warmly and gratefully. More time passed. The court proceedings neared their conclusion, and the likelihood of Ramirez facing serious punishment increased. Attempts by his lawyers to delay things no longer worked. There were too many witnesses and too much evidence. Finally, The day came when the verdict was announced. Ramirez was sentenced to a long prison term and partial asset confiscation. Rodrigo breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the verdict and immediately embraced Isabel when she stepped out of the courtroom. "It's over. Now we can finally live in peace," he said. She smiled, wiping away tears of joy. "Yes, Dad." The word Dad still sounded especially touching to him. A few days later, Rodrigo decided to resolve the apartment issue once and for all. He summoned his lawyers and instructed them to handle the liens. It turned out someone had deliberately created fake debts linked to the developer and Logistica Integral. Once the fraud was exposed, the liens were lifted and the apartment was cleared. "I want to personally take you to your new apartment," he told Isabel once the notary confirmed the paperwork was finalized. "Really?" she beamed, though she had nearly lost hope anything would work out. "I thought it had all fallen apart." "No, it's all settled," he smiled. They went together, picking up the keys from the agent. When Rodrigo led Isabel through the bright rooms, showing her the view of a small park with green trees, she couldn't hold back her tears of happiness. "Thank you," she whispered, looking at him with tear-filled eyes. "This is unbelievable." "You saved my life, daughter," he said seriously, hugging her. "And you're my family. I want you to have everything you need." She pressed her face against his chest, and in that moment, Rodrigo felt truly happy. He had not only been saved, he had gained the most precious thing, a family he never knew he had. The next day, they sat together on the floor of her new apartment, without furniture, drinking tea from plastic cups. Rodrigo suddenly remembered Isabel's words, "If you stay, you won't live till morning," and how she had dragged him out of his hospital room that night. So much had happened since then, his life had been turned completely upside down. "I never thought I had such a heroic daughter," he said, brushing her hair gently. "And I never thought my father would turn out to be such a strong man, brave enough to fight for the truth," she replied. They laughed, their laughter echoing in the empty rooms like a symbol of the new life they were beginning together. They sat there for a long time on the floor of the almost empty apartment, occasionally exchanging smiles, still hardly able to believe they had survived so much and finally found peace. Sometimes Isabel would rest her head on Rodrigo's shoulder, and he would gently wrap his arm around her, as if afraid to lose her again. She felt that now they were connected not just by blood, but by shared experience, by the trials they had faced together. Tears of joy glistened in her eyes, mixed with the sense that a new chapter of life was opening before her, one without fear or loneliness. "Maybe we should at least get a couple of folding chairs?" Rodrigo broke the silence, shifting uncomfortably from sitting too long on the floor. "Or an air mattress. With this kind of renovation, we're going to have to manage without furniture for a while." "Good idea," Isabel smiled, wiping her wet eyelashes. "I'd also get a kettle and some basic dishes, so we can have a proper meal here. Right now, it feels, I don't know, like a desert." "Agreed," Rodrigo nodded, slowly standing up and offering her his hand. "We should get the essentials first. I could have some designers handle it. I know people who do great interior work." "No," Isabel said gently. "I'd like to choose everything myself. I want it to feel like mine. It's my first real home." Rodrigo looked at her with a soft smile. "Of course, I'd be happy if you take care of everything yourself. I'll support you financially, but you decide on the details. The most important thing is that you're happy and know that if you ever need anything, I'm here." She placed her hand over his, nodding gratefully. "Thank you. I never thought it was possible to have a father truly by my side. I always had only my mom, and then she was gone too." He noticed her lips trembling. Memories of her mother still brought deep sadness to Isabel's face. Rodrigo gently stroked her head, cursing himself inwardly for not being part of his daughter's life all those years. But now he was determined to make up for it. "We'll make up for a lot," he said. "And someday, you'll tell me everything you want about your mom. I really want to know what she was like." "I will," Isabel promised. "If only she could see us now. She always said you were a kind man deep down, even if stubborn." Stubborn is putting it mildly, he sighed with a smile. All right, let's get ready and head to the mall. Let's buy at least a few things to make this empty apartment a little less cold and lonely. Isabel agreed, and they went shopping. In the store, she wandered between the shelves and displays, picking simple but lovely items, a towel with delicate green leaves, a couple of plates with blue floral patterns. When she picked up some delicate glass goblets, Rodrigo asked, "Ready to pour some wine and celebrate the housewarming?" "We can celebrate without wine," she laughed. "But we should definitely celebrate." "Then let's get them." Rodrigo added the glasses to the cart and then pointed to a soft blanket. "Look at this, it's really cozy. It'll keep you warm on cool evenings." "I wouldn't mind," she agreed. "Let's take it. But I want to pay for part of the shopping. I feel awkward that you're pulling out your wallet for everything." "Isabel," he said gently, "you're my daughter. Understand that I spent my life making money so I could feel secure. And now, for the first time, I have the chance to spend it with real joy. Please, let me do this." She blushed, a tender flutter in her chest. Every time he said "my daughter," it felt like something new and wonderful. Still, her upbringing wouldn't let her agree silently. "But I'm used to doing everything myself," she started, but saw the warm insistence in his eyes and gave in. "All right, fine. Thank you." After loading their purchases into the trunk, they returned to the new apartment and enthusiastically started unpacking everything for the kitchen, organizing cabinets, wiping shelves, unboxing mugs and plates. They chose places for each item together, and Isabel often found herself giggling quietly. The whole process felt more like a game at home rather than serious work, and Rodrigo was no longer the stern businessman, but just a father, creating a little cozy corner for his daughter with his own hands. "Now we have a really cool kettle," she said, turning on a new white model with a light. "It even glows. I've never seen one like this." "You can afford it," Rodrigo chuckled. "Want to add multicolored lights too? You can brew potions, tea." "Potions without any magic," Isabel corrected with a smile. "Otherwise, with everything we've been through, you might think I'm a witch or something." He laughed, remembering the first time he had felt real fear, when he realized someone wanted him dead. And it was this girl, his daughter, who saved him from a terrible fate. No magic, just fate, leading them down a narrow path of trials. Once they had tidied up a bit and set up a picnic-style plastic table covered with a cloth, they brewed tea and finally sat down. Dusk had already fallen outside. A street lamp flickered through the window, and the room was filled with a warm, cozy atmosphere. "You know," Isabel said, sipping her tea, "I still can't quite believe we can relax. Sure, Ramirez has been sentenced, his people exposed, and the doctors involved have been held accountable too, but I still feel this anxiety inside, like something might happen again." Rodrigo nodded, understanding how hard it was for her to shake the fear. "I can't say I'm completely calm either. But now, everything is different. We have protection, lawyers. And most importantly, justice has been served. If any of Ramirez's men decide to seek revenge, they'll face serious consequences. And believe me, I'll never let anyone hurt you again." She looked at him warmly. "Thank you. And what about you? Are you planning to go back to your old work?" "I've temporarily handed over some duties to my top managers, but I think I'll have to return to the office. Still, after everything that's happened, I'm rethinking how I want to live. Maybe I'll focus not only on profit but also on something meaningful. I've been seriously thinking about starting a charitable foundation or sponsoring medical programs at universities. Maybe supporting medical students. What do you think?" Isabel beamed at the mention of supporting medical students. "That would be wonderful. I know how many students struggle financially, especially those from low-income families. They have to work almost around the clock to afford their education and still find strength for practical training. It's tough." "I understand," said Rodrigo. "Then we can create a special program with scholarships or grants. I'll support those who truly want to study medicine. And, of course, you'll be my chief advisor on this." Really? Isabel lit up. I've always wished someone would push forward the idea of supporting future doctors. They not only study, but even as students, they have to work low-level jobs in hospitals, like I did. She recalled working as a nurse's aide. All right, I agree to be your advisor. I'll provide you with all the necessary information. And I suggest we start with your further education, he added, looking into her eyes. I want you to stop worrying about scholarships, side jobs, or dorm rooms. Your task is to study and become an excellent doctor, and I'll take care of the rest. Do you understand? She bit her lip, feeling tears again, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. For so many years she had thought she would have to fight her way alone, struggling with financial hardships, but now a different path opened before her, all thanks to the man who turned out to be her father. I understand, she whispered, covering his hand with hers. And I promise I'll do my best. I won't waste this opportunity. I'm sure you won't. Well then, let's toast to a new life. Rodrigo raised his simple tea mug with a smile. Nothing fancy, but it's from the heart. They clinked their mugs quietly, and Isabel felt, for the first time in her life, the real warmth of a family. She might not remember him from her childhood, and they had lost so many years, but now fate had given them a chance to build something she had never had. Later that night, Rodrigo drove Isabel back to her old rented room, where she had left some of her things. She planned to move them into the new apartment in the coming days, but still had to settle a few matters with her landlord. They stood by the car for a long time, reluctant to part. It felt so good to be near each other, free and safe. See you tomorrow, she asked, holding a bag with some bathroom essentials they had bought. Of course. I want to show you something at the office, some project documents connected to your university. I think you'll find it interesting. Plus, we need to visit the law firm to finalize the charitable foundation paperwork if we're really going through with it. Isabel nodded, smiling. Then, until tomorrow. Get some rest. You too. He hugged her lightly, holding her close for a moment. Isabel leaned into him, feeling his warmth, then quickly hurried inside so as not to prolong the goodbye and not burst into tears from an overload of emotions. When she entered her apartment, her roommate raised an eyebrow suspiciously. Oh, you're back late. Everything okay? Yes, Isabel nodded, trying to avoid any unnecessary explanations. I'm moving out soon. Moving? Where to? The roommate asked, surprised. Found myself a place, Isabel said with a hint of mischief. My own. The roommate looked stunned. No way. Did you win the lottery or something? Something like that, Isabel replied, not wanting to go into details. She didn't want to tell her that the father she found turned out to be a millionaire and had bought her an apartment. It felt too incredible and too personal to share with a roommate who often brought questionable guests home. I'll be moving out soon, so you might want to start looking for another roommate. The roommate shrugged. Well, suit yourself. Just don't say later you rushed it. It's hard for everyone financially now. Isabel smiled without answering. Deep inside, she felt calm and confident. Now she could afford a different level of life. She went into her tiny room, turned off the light, and collapsed onto the bed. Memories of everything that had happened recently, the fear, the assassination attempt, the escape from the clinic, raced through her mind. And now, everything had changed so drastically it was hard to believe. She closed her eyes, thinking about seeing her father again tomorrow, and smiled softly in the darkness. Morning came. Isabel stepped outside with a small suitcase, waiting for Rodrigo's car. But instead of a luxury sedan, a modest Honda pulled up. Rodrigo was behind the wheel. He lowered the window and greeted her. I figured it's better to stay low profile, he explained as Isabel opened the door. An unmarked car, less attention. I use it sometimes when I don't want people to know I'm Vasquez, the owner of several companies. Smart move, Isabel smiled, settling into the front seat. I thought you always traveled in a fancy car with security. Used to, Rodrigo admitted, starting the engine. But after everything that's happened, I've become more cautious. Besides, showing off with expensive cars doesn't guarantee safety. They pulled onto the road. Isabel glanced back at her suitcase in the trunk. I only packed the essentials. I want to move them to the new apartment first. I'll deal with the rest later. I'll also pay the landlady for a couple of extra weeks, so she won't feel wronged. Good, Rodrigo nodded. Once you're settled, if you need help with heavy lifting, I can arrange movers. Thanks. I'll figure something out. They reached the office, located in one of the city's business centers, without any trouble. Isabel noticed how people in the hallways respectfully nodded at Rodrigo. Some greeted him, while others curiously looked at the young woman walking beside the boss. He walked through the halls with a businesslike air, nodding in return greetings. But once they entered his spacious office, the atmosphere immediately became less formal. It's unusual seeing you in my workspace, he said with a smile. Come in, make yourself comfortable. The office was elegantly furnished in a restrained style, dark wood furniture, leather chairs, large windows with a view of the city. On the shelves behind glass doors were rows of folders and a few photographs, the sea, a boat, landscapes where Rodrigo had clearly vacationed with business partners. The only thing missing was family photos, giving the office a slightly cold feel. I don't have a photo of you here, he said, slightly awkwardly, as if sensing her thoughts. I should fix that. Well, we can do that later, Isabel said, lowering her eyes. You wanted to show me something? He led her to the monitor and opened a folder containing various files, including a logo for the Future Charitable Foundation. I'm planning to call the foundation Doctors of the Future, he explained. Here's the charter, the principles. I want you to contribute too, maybe as a co-founder. I'll be the main investor formally, but you'll be the medical consultant and the bridge to the university. Isabel blushed with pride and joy. That sounds like a big responsibility. But I'm still a student. Precisely, he interrupted. Who better than a student knows what students need? Don't worry, we'll have professional experts too. You won't have to handle everything yourself. But your opinion will matter. Isabel nodded, scanning the documents. It all seemed incredible to her. Then Rodrigo switched tabs and showed her the draft of the foundation's future website. It had sections: mission and goals, scholarships, research grants, medical charity projects, financial transparency reports. She scanned the layout and felt a surge of excitement inside. Wow, she breathed. This is new for me, but I feel like I could contribute a lot of ideas. Great, he smiled. So here's the plan. After lunch, we'll gather a team of my managers who'll work on this project, and you'll join us. You'll share your vision for the scholarship program and what criteria should be set for applicants. Of course, Isabel nodded, lifting her chin proudly. I'm ready. They exchanged smiles. At that moment, a knock came at the door, and a middle-aged man in a formal suit entered. Isabel guessed he was one of Vasquez's top managers. The man looked surprised to see a young woman next to the boss, but quickly composed himself. Rodrigo, sorry to come unannounced, he began. But there are urgent issues with the contracts you signed before your illness. There are discrepancies with the suppliers. We're facing penalties. Garcia, have a seat, Rodrigo pointed to a chair. Meet my daughter, Isabel. Garcia looked a little startled. Your daughter? Pleased to meet you, he mumbled, trying to hide his confusion. I didn't know. It's a recent development, Rodrigo replied briefly. Let's deal with the penalties. Give me the documents. While they discussed the papers, Isabel sat quietly, observing how her father handled business. She saw that same confident, firm energy she had only glimpsed before. He barely raised his voice, but every word carried weight. Garcia nodded constantly, jotting down instructions quickly. When the meeting was over, Garcia bowed slightly and left the office. He'll get used to it, Rodrigo said, turning to Isabel. Most people here don't even know I have an adult daughter, but soon it will be a well-known fact. Hopefully, it won't cause unnecessary questions. Isabel frowned. I just don't want people to think I'm here because my father's the boss or that I'm trying to take advantage. If anyone thinks that, it's their problem, Rodrigo said firmly. You deserve respect. You've made your own way in life. My appearance is just the logical reunion of family. Besides, you're not interested in titles or wealth, you want to become a good doctor. Isn't that true? Yes, exactly, she smiled. Thank you for understanding. All right, he said, standing and stretching. Let's grab some lunch, and then we'll have the foundation meeting. They walked to the corporate cafeteria, where everyone, of course, knew Rodrigo. But even here, he behaved simply, without arrogance. Isabel chose her usual soup and salad, while Rodrigo opted for oatmeal with fruit, trying to stick to a healthier diet after everything he had been through. Their conversation was easy and relaxed. By the way, Rodrigo said, you mentioned you wanted to tell me something about your mother. Maybe share a few memories? Isabel paused, flipping through warm memories in her mind. You know, Mom was very affectionate but also principled. When she faced financial hardships, she never took anything from shady people. She always said, I'll manage on my own. I have a daughter. For her, I'll work day and night if I have to. She often said she didn't want to regret her decisions later in life. Sometimes I felt like she wanted to tell me more about you, but she was afraid it would upset me or make me dream too much about you coming back. Maybe she didn't want to give me false hope. Rodrigo listened, clenching his teeth against the guilt. I regret that she never got the chance to tell me she was pregnant. But back then, I was so young, trying to build a business. I left in a rush for another city, and we lost contact. If only I had known. Isabel reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Mom never said anything bad about you, Isabel said. She even kept your letters and photos. Maybe she wanted to reach out someday, but circumstances, illness, lack of money, made her think it was impossible. But now, I believe she would have been happy to see us together. Rodrigo took a deep breath. I hope so. And I want to believe she would approve of how we're living now. Because I'm truly glad I found you, and I'm not going to lose you. Isabel nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Yet joy outweighed the sadness. They finished their lunch and then returned to the office, where by 3 o'clock, a team of managers, designers, and lawyers had gathered to discuss the foundation's development plan. It was Isabel's first time at such a meeting, and at first, she felt out of place sitting among such experienced people. But as soon as the conversation turned to the needs of medical students, she jumped in. I think scholarships shouldn't only go to top students but also to those who show real human qualities, who volunteer in hospitals or participate in charity projects. Because a good doctor isn't just someone who memorizes textbooks but someone who truly cares about people. Everyone listened with interest. Rodrigo sat across from her, unable to hide his proud smile. One of the managers nodded. Good idea. So we should include criteria that evaluate not only academic performance but also community service and volunteer work. We could ask hospitals for reference letters. Yes, Isabel agreed. And the selection committee should include doctors, not just businessmen and officials. Of course, Rodrigo confirmed. I'm planning to involve specialists who have already earned their reputations. And one of my acquaintances, a professor of medicine, is ready to participate. By the way, Isabel, it's the same professor who did your tests when we uncovered the crimes at the clinic. He's a good man, Isabel recalled, happy that this thread continued. He always supported students at the university. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. They discussed financial matters, budget structures, potential sponsors, and the PR firm that would properly present the initiative to the media. When it was over, everyone stood up and shook hands. The managers looked at Isabel with respect. Someone even quietly praised. Good idea, very refreshing. She blushed slightly and smiled in response. Well, how was your first business meeting, daughter? Rodrigo asked when they were alone. It's strange, she admitted. On the one hand, it's interesting. On the other, it feels so formal. I'm not used to this kind of environment. Normally, I see hospital wards and hallways. You'll get used to it, he smiled. And besides, it won't be your everyday responsibility. The important thing is we'll launch the program, and then the hired team will carry it forward. Isabel nodded. You know, I'm happy I can help because it's truly a needed cause. But I want to continue studying at my own pace, and when I graduate, I want to become a real doctor and help people directly in clinics. I completely agree, Rodrigo said. It will be a proud day for me when patients say, Doctor, thank you. And those words will be meant for my daughter. She smiled and glanced at her watch. It's getting late. I still need to grab some things from my old apartment and move them into the new one. Should we go, or do you need to stay? Rodrigo shook his head. No, I'm done for today. Let's go. We'll help you move what we can. The rest we can move later with a truck. They left the office together, and Isabel didn't even notice how the staff whispered behind them, Is that his daughter? How did we not know? But no one dared ask questions aloud. Isabel also felt the curious stares but tried to ignore them. She knew that in any big company, rumors were inevitable. When they returned to her old apartment building, Isabel quickly ran upstairs to gather her things while Rodrigo waited by the car. About 10 minutes later, she came down carrying a bag, which he immediately took and put in the trunk. At that moment, her neighbor stepped out of the building, and seeing Rodrigo, couldn't resist commenting. Oh, so that's your rich boyfriend, huh? Isabel almost choked. Not a boyfriend. He's my father. The neighbor choked too and stared wide-eyed. Your father? You're joking. But Isabel didn't explain. She quickly got into the car to avoid awkward questions. Rodrigo handed her the keys, but she preferred he drive. As they pulled away, Isabel sighed in relief. Just wait, now the whole building will be buzzing with rumors. They'll say I was hiding a millionaire father or something like that. Rodrigo chuckled. Let them say what they want. You know the truth, and I know it. That's all that matters. She smiled, realizing he was right. Other people's opinions shouldn't matter more than her own peace of mind. They headed to the new apartment, carried her things up, and scattered them around the rooms. It was already deep into the night when Isabel realized how exhausted she was, and Rodrigo suggested, Maybe I should stay over? I don't have a bed or a mattress in this apartment. Of course, but I can sleep on the floor or even in the car. No, Dad, she smiled gently. Go home and get some rest. I still have to unpack a few things, check where to put what, clean up a little, and then I'll head to bed. Are you sure? Absolutely. Don't worry, nothing's going to happen, she said, pointing to the front door. It's a new lock. And the building has security. I'll be fine. He hesitated but finally agreed, seeing her firm resolve. They stepped into the hallway, and he leaned down slightly to kiss her on the forehead. All right, sweetheart. See you tomorrow, then. Call me if you need anything, I'll be nearby. She closed the door behind him, feeling a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. The empty apartment didn't feel lonely anymore. She knew her father was nearby, truly living in the same city, and there was now a strong bond between them. In the morning, waking up with an unfamiliar sense of freshness and calm, Isabel pulled on her sweatpants and walked through the rooms, breathing in the scent of new paint and repairs. She took a shower in her own bathroom, still wanting to pinch herself to be sure it wasn't a dream. Then she decided to have breakfast. She didn't have a fridge yet, but she had some food left in a cooler bag, yogurt, a piece of cheese, and some fruit. She thought back to her life before meeting her father, night shifts at the hospital, the meager salary of a nurse's aide, the constant fatigue, and the longing for a close person by her side. Now, all that was behind her. Although she still planned to study and work hard, after all, she had entered med school, her future looked different now, and most importantly, she had a family. A couple of hours later, The doorbell rang. Opening the door, Isabel saw a young man holding a pizza box and a bag. "Are you Isabel Vasquez?" he asked, checking his phone. "I have a delivery for you." "But I didn't order anything," Isabel said in surprise. "It must be a mistake." "No, this is the address, and it's already paid for. Pizza and juice. Maybe a gift from someone?" Isabel paused for a second and then smiled. It could very well be her father trying to surprise her. She thanked the courier, took the box and bag, and closed the door. Opening the pizza box, she found a note inside. "So you don't go hungry this morning, Dad." Isabel broke into a wide smile, feeling a warm wave of happiness. He really cared about even the little things, as if trying to make up for all he hadn't given her in childhood. She placed the note down gently, poured herself some juice, and started her breakfast. Afterward, she felt like calling to thank him but decided instead to surprise him by visiting his office. She now knew the way and wasn't afraid to show up unannounced. After getting ready, she ordered a taxi and, in half an hour, arrived at the familiar building. The security guard at the entrance greeted her warmly. "Are you here to see Mr. Vasquez? You'll need a pass." "I'm his daughter," she said shyly. The guard nodded understandingly and let her through, pressing a special button to open the turnstile. Isabel thanked him and went up to the right floor, walking down the corridor to Rodrigo's office. His assistant, a strictly dressed woman in her 40s, looked up in surprise. "Good afternoon. Are you Isabel?" "Yes," she confirmed. "Is my father in?" The assistant smiled slightly. "Yes, he's in his office. He's finishing a call and will let you in shortly. Please, have a seat." Isabel sat on the couch, glancing around at the modern interior, feeling a flutter of excitement and joy in her stomach. It was still strange to just walk into a business office where employees and secretaries bustled about, and to know she was here to see her father. A few minutes later, the office door opened, and Rodrigo appeared. Seeing Isabel, he quickly finished his call and gestured for her to come in. She stood and followed him inside, hearing the assistant quietly close the door behind them. "It's so nice to see you here," he said, walking up and hugging her. "I wasn't expecting you, especially during work hours. I decided to surprise you," Isabel smiled. "And thanks for the pizza, by the way. It was delicious, and the note was perfect." "I'm glad you liked it," Rodrigo replied, keeping an arm around her shoulders. "So, how was your first night in the new apartment?" She briefly told him that she loved it, that she had already started planning where to place the furniture. Rodrigo listened with obvious pleasure. "That's great," he said. "I was planning to make a down payment today to order a kitchen set and a bed for you. But if you'd prefer to choose everything yourself, we can go to a furniture showroom and look at options." "That sounds perfect," she nodded. "But I also wanted to ask if there's anything I can help you with here at the office, maybe review some data for the foundation." "If you have time," he smiled. "Actually, we could review some of the responses from students that have started coming in through the foundation's email. I forwarded some to my assistant. She printed them out." "I'd love to." Isabel brightened. "I can add my comments." And so they spent part of the day together. Isabel sat at a laptop sorting through emails from students who had heard about the Doctors of the Future Foundation through social media. Some asked about application deadlines, others inquired whether medical interns could participate, and many simply thanked them for the initiative. Isabel carefully read each letter, sorting them into folders: grants, scholarships, questions. Rodrigo, working on his business papers at the same time, would occasionally glance at his daughter, smiling at how focused she looked. Time flew by unnoticed. When they finally looked up from the computers, it was already 6 in the evening. "Wow." Isabel stretched. "I'm starving. Want to grab some dinner?" "I'd love to." Rodrigo agreed. "There's a great place nearby, excellent cuisine. Plus, we can talk about how to promote the Foundation's program." They left the office together and headed to a restaurant in a neighboring district. Isabel had never been there before but had heard it was one of the city's prestigious spots: soft lighting, pleasant music, people in business suits and elegant dresses. Rodrigo led her to a table by the window and ordered them a light dinner. He offered her a choice, fish or meat, and she chose fish, wanting to stay healthy. A good choice, her father approved. I'm also sticking to something light today. The doctors told me not to overdo it with heavy food after all the medication they were giving me. How are you feeling, by the way? She asked with concern. Any more pain or shortness of breath? It's all gone now, he replied. Sometimes I get a bit of a racing heart if I get nervous, but I try to stay calm. It's just, when I think about how close I came to dying, it still feels unsettling. Me too, Isabel said softly. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that conversation at the clinic. Maybe we wouldn't be sitting here now. But fate brought you exactly where I was, Rodrigo said, squeezing her hand on the table. So it wasn't for nothing. She nodded, looking into his kind eyes. At that moment, their food arrived, and they began to eat. Isabel was pleasantly surprised by how good the dishes were, savoring every bite. At one point, the restaurant manager approached them. Good evening, Don Rodrigo. Always a pleasure to see you. We'd like to offer you a sample of our new dessert. Thank you, Rodrigo nodded. But we'll pick something later. We're in the middle of a conversation. The manager smiled and left, and Isabel gave her father a surprised look. Are you a regular here? I've been here a few times for business dinners. It's a discreet place, which is why I like it. I see, she smirked, continuing her meal. By the way, where do you live? You've never shown me your house. Rodrigo tensed slightly. My house is outside the city, in a gated community. A pretty secluded place. I hadn't been there much after the hospital. I stayed mostly in a rented apartment under protection during the investigation. But now it's safe to go back. If you want, I'll show it to you. It's a big house. Though a bit empty, I never really made it feel like a real home. I'd love to see it, Isabel admitted. It's interesting to know where my father has been living all this time. Maybe you have a bunch of cool stuff there? Plenty, he laughed. But more for status than for the soul. All right, we'll go one weekend. Let's say Saturday. I'll even make an asado if you want. She nodded eagerly, and they agreed. They finished dinner, had a cup of herbal tea, and stepped out into the street. It was already dark, and the streetlights lit up the pavement. Rodrigo took her arm, and they strolled leisurely to the car. What's your class schedule like now? He asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. You haven't forgotten about university, have you? Of course not, Isabel smiled. I have lectures 3 times a week and practicals in the hospital on Mondays. The rest is self-study. I already told my department head that I'm planning to write my thesis on cardiovascular pathologies. Maybe my practice and your treatment experience will come in handy. Perfect, he nodded. If you need anything, I'll give you all my medical records. Plus, I can help you get in touch with the doctors who treated me, the good ones, not the ones who sold out to Ramirez. Isabel looked at him gratefully. Thank you. It's important to dive into a real topic, not just rewrite a textbook. By the way, where are we sleeping tonight? Should I leave you somewhere or are you dropping me off? Let's do this. I'll drop you off at your apartment and head back to mine. But on the weekend, we're going to my house outside the city as planned. Deal? Deal. Then tomorrow I'll come by your office myself. We need to review the student applications. Agreed. They drove to Isabel's apartment, and as she was getting out of the car, Rodrigo reminded her. If anything happens, call me. You have the security system, but still, just in case. Dad, everything's fine, she laughed. Don't worry so much. He smiled, gave her a warm look, and drove off into the night. Isabel went upstairs, feeling a joyful excitement. The next few days passed in a similar rhythm, studying, meetings at the office, and settling into her new apartment. Slowly, she made the place her own. She ordered a sofa, a table, chairs, and a wardrobe. Rodrigo agreed to help financially, but she insisted on contributing her own money as well. They argued a little but eventually compromised. He would pay for the large furniture, and she would take care of the smaller things like curtains, bedding, and accessories. On Friday evening, they met at the office to head together to Rodrigo's country house. Isabel followed behind him in her own car, trying to imagine what his estate would look like. When they turned off the highway onto a narrow road lined with tall trees, she felt a pleasant anticipation. After about half a kilometer, tall wrought iron gates came into view, and behind them, a neatly maintained property. Rodrigo took out a remote, and the gates swung open automatically. They drove down a paved driveway to a large two-story mansion. The facade was in a classical style, with columns on the porch. Everything looked luxurious, maybe even a little ostentatious. Isabel got out of her car and stood for a moment, taking it all in. "Wow," she murmured. "You really do live in luxury." "Yeah," he said with a crooked smile. "As you can see, I didn't exactly cut corners. At one time, I thought having a big house would show off my status. But it turned out, it mostly just made me feel lonely." Isabel glanced at the well-manicured lawn and the neatly trimmed bushes. It was beautiful, but yes, probably empty without a family. He nodded and gestured for her to follow him to the entrance. Inside, the mansion impressed her even more: marble floors in the foyer, a grand staircase with carved railings, paintings on the walls, and numerous rooms. Everything was tidy but lacked a lived-in atmosphere. As Rodrigo had said, no family celebrations had been held here for a long time, no children's laughter had echoed through the halls, and no woman's touch had made the place feel truly cozy. "I have a housekeeper," he explained. "She comes a couple of times a week to keep things in order. But she has her own life, she doesn't live here permanently." Isabel ran her hand over the glossy surface of a small table in the hall. "It's very beautiful, but it feels a little cold. Even your rented apartment, where we stayed under protection, felt warmer somehow." "Sorry, I don't mean to offend you." "I understand," he sighed. "I think the same. Maybe someday this place will come to life in a different way. Come on, let me show you the kitchen. Everything's ready for an asado outside." The kitchen was fully equipped with the latest technology, top-of-the-line appliances, a massive fridge, and an island with a built-in cooktop. Isabel looked around curiously, wondering why one person would need so much space and so many gadgets. Rodrigo switched on the lights on the back terrace. Beyond the windows was a small courtyard with a parrilla, loungers, and tables. "This is where I used to have asados for partners or friends," he said. "But that all stopped when I had to start worrying about assassination attempts. Now, let's try it again." Soon they were outside. Rodrigo started the fire on the parrilla while Isabel helped marinate the meat and fish. The pleasant scent of smoke drifted through the air. As they cooked, they joked a lot, even reminiscing about how not so long ago Isabel had saved her father from the hospital. And now, here they were, standing by the grill like old friends. "You know," she said while turning the fish wrapped in foil, "I'm amazed at how quickly we got close. I thought it would be awkward, like, what do you even say to someone you've never known for so many years? But I don't feel that way at all." "I feel the same," he replied. "It's like we were always meant to be together, just a bit delayed in time. Now we're reconnecting." She smiled, and her eyes sparkled. Soon, everything was ready. They sat at a table set under the open sky, on soft chairs with a tablecloth spread out, plates filled with salads and freshly baked bread. The meat and fish were laid out on a shared platter. Isabel couldn't help but think this was one of the first times she had experienced a real family picnic. "Let's talk more about your childhood," Rodrigo suggested once they started eating. "You've shared a little already. Maybe you could tell me something funny or touching." Isabel shrugged. "Well, something funny. When I was about 9, I tried to treat my friend's cat, wrapped its legs in bandages and fed it vitamins. The cat was shocked, but my mom was even more shocked when she saw it. She had to rescue the poor thing. And I also used to go to a craft club, but none of my projects ever turned out right. Oh, and, she blushed, I dreamed of becoming a ballerina. Can you imagine? Rodrigo laughed. Seriously? Why didn't you stick with it? Well, we didn't have the money for proper lessons. And when my mom got sick, I had to help more around the house. Eventually, I realized I wanted to save lives, not dance. Although ballet is beautiful. He nodded, thoroughly enjoying her stories. He couldn't recall anything about raising a daughter, he hadn't been there, and that hurt deep inside. But now he was doing his best to make up for lost time. They laughed a lot, reminisced about different moments, and slowly the evening drifted into late night. The sky was filled with stars, and the air grew cooler. Maybe we should go inside, he suggested when Isabel started to shiver. I have a fireplace. We can light it and sit by the fire. Perfect, she agreed, picking up her plate. Let me help clean up, so we don't leave everything out overnight. They gathered the dishes, brought them to the kitchen, loaded some into the dishwasher, and quickly washed the rest. Rodrigo showed her where she could find a blanket if she got cold. Then they went to the spacious living room, where a fireplace stood. Rodrigo stacked some logs and lit a fire. The flames crackled warmly, illuminating the plush sofas and armchairs. There we go, Rodrigo said, settling onto one of the couches. Now we can just sit and enjoy the quiet. Isabel sat down beside him, wrapping herself in a blanket and tucking her legs underneath her. Her eyes roamed the living room, expensive furniture, carved cabinets, and a few antique figurines. It all looked like a museum, but with the fire burning, it felt a bit more homey. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the wood. Suddenly, Isabel spoke, staring into the flames. Tell me, have you ever thought about starting another family? Having more kids? He sighed, visibly tensing. I used to think about it, maybe. But after one divorce, then another, I got disillusioned. Business consumed me, and I stopped seeing the point in marriage. Plus, I was wary of being used. Too many people only saw my money. I understand, she nodded. But now you're not alone. You have me. And maybe someday you'll meet someone who'll value you for who you are, not for what you have. He gave a small, wry smile. Maybe. But for now, it's enough for me to know I have a daughter. She gently touched his hand. And it's enough for me to know I have a father. Though, of course, if you ever want to start a new chapter, I'll be happy for you. He pressed her hand against his chest. Thank you for your support. But for now, let's just enjoy this moment. For us, it's already a lot. They sat until late into the night, talking about the foundation's future, Isabel's upcoming studies, and Rodrigo's new business ideas. Eventually, when the firewood was nearly burned down, Isabel yawned, feeling sleepy. Where would you like to sleep? He asked, standing up from the couch. There are several bedrooms upstairs. I'll show you. You can choose whichever you like. I haven't stayed here in a while, but everything should be clean, just empty. Isabel agreed. They went upstairs, and he led her into a spacious room with a large bed, a wardrobe, and windows overlooking the garden. Rodrigo quickly found an extra blanket and some pillows. If you need anything else, let me know. The bathroom is at the end of the hall. Thanks, she smiled. It's amazing to think I'm spending the night at my father's country house, she added. He sighed, lightly brushing her hair. I hope everything will only get better from now on. Good night, Isabelita. Good night, Dad. He stepped out, gently closing the door behind him. She was left alone in the quiet darkness of the room. For a moment, it felt strange to sleep in such a luxurious place. But sleep soon overtook her, and she sank into deep dreams, full of quiet joy and a feeling of safety. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the semi-sheer curtains, waking them. Isabel stretched and stepped into the hallway. From the slightly ajar door of one room, she heard a quiet voice. Rodrigo was already awake and talking on the phone. She went to the bathroom, washed up, and then headed downstairs to the kitchen. There she found that her father had already made coffee and set out toast, cheese, and fruit on the table. "Good morning," he greeted her, setting aside his phone. "I'll finish this call in a second and then we'll have breakfast." Isabel nodded, smiling. Soon, they were sitting at the table, each with a cup of coffee. Outside the window, the sunny yard was unfolding, the morning dew slowly evaporating. It was so quiet and peaceful that it was hard to believe there had once been a deadly threat hanging over them. "Listen," Rodrigo said, "I have an idea. What if we organize a small party here next week? Invite Raphael and the others who helped us during the investigation, the professor who did the analysis, too. We'll tell them we want to thank them for their support. What do you think?" Isabel beamed. "That's a great idea. They really deserve it, especially Raphael. He put so much effort into keeping you safe." "Exactly. I want to give everyone a small symbolic gift and personally thank them again. Nothing formal, just an asado and some music. Maybe we can set it up right here in the yard?" "I'm all for it," Isabel said happily, already imagining them gathered around the grill, but this time in good company. "I can take care of the invitations and the menu if you want." "That would be wonderful," he approved. "We'll coordinate the date later to make sure everyone can come. And I'd also like you to officially introduce the professor to the foundation. He's agreed to be our academic advisor." "Of course," she nodded, biting into her toast. "I'll call him." After breakfast, they decided to take a short walk around the property. Rodrigo showed Isabel the garden, a small pond behind the house, and the stables, though they were currently empty. He had once kept horses but sold them since he wasn't much into riding. She looked at everything with admiration. "It's so beautiful here. Clean air, greenery, peace. I'd love to come here on weekends to study my lectures in quiet." "Come anytime," he offered. "It'll be a nice break from the city noise." She thought for a moment. "Maybe I will. I only really need to be in the city for classes and hospital shifts. I could spend my free time here. And you'd have some company too." "That's true," he smiled. "At least then this big house will have some real meaning." They walked further down a path leading through a small alley. Isabel lingered near a flower bed where bright red roses were in full bloom. "They're beautiful," she said, bending down to inhale their fragrance. "Who takes care of them?" "The gardener," Rodrigo explained. "He comes twice a week to water and prune them. I don't really have the time or the know-how." Isabel chuckled softly. "My mom loved flowers. We used to grow violets on the windowsill. She always said that flowers bring light into a home." Rodrigo smiled, touched by her memory. At that moment, he noticed a pickup truck pulling up to the gates. A man in work clothes got out and headed toward the utility shed. "That must be the firewood delivery," Rodrigo said. "I ordered a few more logs. Let them unload it in the yard." Isabel nodded, and they made their way back toward the house. Standing on the porch, she suddenly felt a strong urge to tell her father how grateful she was for this peaceful, happy time. Life hadn't brought them together right away, but now, being with him, she felt truly safe. "Dad," she said, looking into his eyes. He stopped, catching the special tone in her voice. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "For being here, for not turning away when you found out about me, for letting me into your life." He smiled and touched her shoulder gently. "How could I not? I'm your father. And honestly, I'm grateful life gave me the chance to realize that." They stood there in the bright sunlight, beside the big house that was no longer a symbol of loneliness but was starting to find its purpose. Slowly, it was becoming a home, filled with real warmth. Somewhere in the future awaited new days, new projects, gatherings with friends, parties, and quiet family evenings, all the things they once never dared dream of. But now, that dream was becoming reality because they had found each other and overcome their fears. Their story was just beginning.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.